Well, good morning. If we could go ahead and get settled in. We are so appreciative of all of you that have come back for day 2. You are the committed. We are absolutely excited about the conversations that have been held on day 1 and even early conversations this morning, both in our breakfast and then some other breakout group conversations that were going on. In particular, as I said yesterday, the idea of being able to round out our conversation about completion into a broader conversation about our role in the economy and society and the regions in which we reside. Very excited that that was able to involve our community partners, and I hope that it's been a beneficial conversation. We're going to continue that today, and actually before we leave today, we'll be hearing from your regional breakout groups, some of the highlights of your conversation, and we know that there will be a lot to be learned that'll shape our strategies moving forward. This morning, we've got a packed agenda. We're going to start here together, and then we'll break out into 2 tracks, one for USG institutions and the other for TCSG institutions. But very excited to start off this morning with Stan Jones, and I'm going to turn it over to Josephine to remind you who Stan Jones is. We've not made up any additional biography since yesterday, other than he's done a great job being with us in these 2 days.
Again, welcome back, and we're so pleased to see family here because we know that most of you are representing our colleges and universities. Again, we'd like to reintroduce to you Stan Jones, who's the president of Complete College America. This morning's topic, however, is relating specifically to guided pathways to student success, and we'll hear some very insightful comments about specific actions and strategies that we need to do to bring our completion agenda to fruition. Stan?
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you, Houston. Thanks for having me this morning. And just to refresh your memory, yesterday I talked a little bit about choice and the idea that for college students, we typically have been all about choice, more programs, more courses, midnight courses, Saturday courses, more options, and all of this choice, the evidence is really pretty overwhelming, has not been good for students. On most college campuses, you have one counselor for 400, 500, 600 students. You might see that counselor on graduation day, but those are occurrences. I've cited a counselor. That's kind of how it goes on many of these campuses, and students kind of pick their own courses, and they kind of look at the courses as if they're choosing from a cafeteria, and rather than looking at whole programs. So with that kind of a backdrop, and I guess also to illustrate why is this important, I was really struck yesterday, you probably saw Jim Applegate's slide on the different income groups. That slide, I saw something similar to that about 20 years ago. I'd spent most of my 35 years as a legislator working for the governor, as the commissioner in Indiana, working on access issues, as many of you have, encouraging more young people to go to college. I think that access is really part of our DNA. We so firmly and strongly believe that providing people an opportunity for education will enrich their lives. And they really need to take advantage of that. And I have spent most of my career doing that. So it was kind of stunning to me when about 20 years ago, in 1990, when I was in the legislature, across my desk comes this set of statistics. And it essentially, it says that if you were born in the upper income quartile, you have a 77% chance of graduating from college. In the lowest income quartile, you have a 7% chance of graduating from college. And I was just stunned to see those numbers, to see that your odds were 10 times better in the upper income quartile. What's even more surprising and stunning is that 20 years later, the chart that Jim Applegate showed you yesterday has not changed hardly at all, after another 20 years of investment and commitments by so many people across this country. And so this is a stubborn issue. And we need to not only focus on getting students in the front door, the access that we pride so strongly, but look at the students standing on the stage on graduation day, both to ensure that there are more of them and to ensure that they're more representative of this country. And we firmly believe that this is one of the game changer strategies, the concept of guided pathways, that you can get remarkably better results, not marginally better, not 5 and 10% better, but remarkably better results, both in terms of graduation, on-time graduation, and especially for first-time generation students, for minority students, and low-income students. So we've talked a lot about graduation. One of the things we really didn't talk about graduation is this novel concept that somebody may actually graduate on time. We kind of defaulted that 6-year graduation rates are acceptable for 4-year colleges, and 3-year graduation rates are acceptable for 2-year colleges. But we also need to pay attention to the fact that more students need to graduate on time. And these are national numbers, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were similar in Georgia. One of the things that happens to far too many students is they accumulate way too many credits. As you can see here, and again, these are national numbers, but again, I don't know that they're different in Georgia, but students earning a bachelor's degree, on average, this is median, so you know that many students graduate with even more credits than 136 credits. For associate degree, it's even more pronounced, and for certificate programs, it's twice what one might accumulate in a year. So across the country, students are not only racking up excessive time, but excessive credits. Sometimes there are poor choices on students' part. They simply don't count toward the degree. Sometimes the courses that they need to find are unavailable, so they sometimes end up taking another course, still not getting the needed course. Sometimes they are lost because the course doesn't transfer. And sometimes all of this adds to unnecessary credits, far in excess of what they need for a degree, and contributes to an extended period of time on campus. And what we're advocating that these guided pathways is, again, not to look at these programs or the colleges like it's a cafeteria, that every period of registration is this grand strategy to go pick through the course catalog, but rather that you think about programs as holistic, and you think about students choosing programs, not courses. So the idea is that you need to, as I said yesterday, help students pick careers, pick majors, and the real emphasis on counseling ought to be to get students in the right majors and the right careers. And having done that, the faculty really need to lay out a holistic program that leads them to graduation in a timely way. A key part, and probably the most important part of this strategy, are default pathways. And this is pretty simple. Once you, for example, are pursuing a psychology degree, you would be on that pathway. The courses would be laid out course by course. You wouldn't need permission to stay on the pathway. You would need permission to get off the pathway. There's some computer science course or art course you want to take that's not on your pre-approved list. You could still take that, but you need permission. So we're not taking choice away. We're making choice deliberative and thoughtful as you move through this path. My son somehow he escaped public college, which was my plan, and made it to a private college, Carnegie Mellon. And every time, it's a 6-hour drive, every time we would go through the catalog. And making sure that he was going to be graduating within 4 years. Very expensive, as you well know. And of course, one time he turned and looked at me and said, "Dad, isn't this about getting an education?" And I had this kind of stunned look on my face. And he laughed. He said, "I'm just kidding you. I know I need to get out on time." But you better believe at private colleges whose tuitions are $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, those students graduate on time. And it's a thoughtful, deliberative plan to get them to graduation day. And we can do as much for the thousands and hundreds and millions of students that are going to public colleges. But default pathways are key to this, putting students on these pathways. Defaults are throughout our whole lives. People make choices for us because they put us on default paths. and that when we choose health care plans, if you don't choose a health care plan, you're not likely to be dropped altogether. You're on some kind of default plan. There's default plans on any number of things you do. When you turn on their computer, you have a default browser, you have a default settings. We go through life with defaults, and most of the time, we think that's pretty good. Sometimes we change those. This is the same concept. Just one of the best illustrations, there's a book that I might encourage you to read called Nudge. Pretty popular book. It's kind of enjoyable to read. It's the whole concept is about default pathways. They said in this country, we do organ donor through our driver's licenses and checking on. We have about a 20 to 25% participation rate. In half a dozen countries in this world, they do the reverse. They have a reverse checkoff. In other words, you're presumed to be an organ donor unless you check off. They have about a 90% participation rate. Very significant difference. There are some colleges that are giving defaults as an option. In other words, in Hawaii, for example, at their main campus, they sent their incoming freshmen 3 schedules, and they said if you pick one of these 3 schedules, you can pre-register, you're set, you're ready to go. They had 58% of students choose that preset schedule for their first semester, and they're continuing into that second semester. So default pathways can work very effectively, and students can be very happy using those default pathways. One of the keys to this is also meta majors. Don't start with the concept that students need to pick among 200 programs to make that career choice. As I mentioned yesterday, the research about psychology and making choices indicate that if we get more than 7 choices, it's really hard for people to make decisions. But if you don't get any choice, you're pretty frustrated. And so they say 4 to 7 choices is really ideal for most people faced with decisions to make. And so most colleges that are doing this start out with 5 to 7, what they call meta majors, where students start out for the first year until they start to specialize in the major. And that's also the first year when you help them choose more specifically what the major is. You also don't have unclassified students. Essentially, if they can't choose among the 5 to 7, they're defaulted into the liberal arts core, so at least they're marching toward their degree. These then branch into academic maps, the semester by semester plan, all the way to graduation. Obviously, you start out with on-time maps, but there's going to be course corrections, and you do that as well. All of this is kind of, I'd recommended that you look at eAdvisor online by Arizona State, and you can visually see how this works for students and counselors. It's also, in many of these cases, supported by technology. Some can be, I think the Arizona State model is probably the Cadillac model. Very good. Georgia State is working on a consortium of, I think, 5 colleges, and so it's shared cost, and their costs are much more modest. When I was in Hawaii, they brought the one tech guy forward for the whole system, who probably does this on his kitchen table, and kind of build it off of the Banner system, because they call it the STAR system, also very effective. So this doesn't need to be too expensive. You can also do shared cost. I know the Board of Regents will probably be looking at strategies around this as well, but the technology can support the semester by semester plan. And just to remind you, I gave you an example yesterday as to why this is important. A lot of colleges have academic maps now, but they're not used. They're on websites, but they're not used. They're put aside. Or they're not clear enough. And the example I gave you yesterday was my son-in-law, who's now 29, just started back at the community college, and I said, you've got to see your counselor, your program counselor, not a counselor, your program counselor. And of course, there was ships passing in the night. That just was never really going to happen. So he comes back after the first semester and he shows me his class list, and he signed up for all these liberal arts courses. And I said, but yes, you're in a technical program and you're planning to transfer, and I can't believe that they're going to let you take that many liberal arts courses and that those would count. And he said, but I talked to a counselor and they said these transfer to the 4-year college. I said, I get that part, but they don't transfer 4-year program. There'll be excess credits. He says, what do you mean? Undistributed credits. So he says, what do you mean? What are undistributed credits? So, students go through this all the time, and they don't even know enough to ask the right questions, or they think they are asking the right questions. The counselors think they're giving them the right answers, and still they end up. And of course, he didn't take math his first semester, which causes him then to not be able to take math his second semester, or physics, or statics. And so that jams you up as well. And so the importance of these maps are just so terribly important for students not only to have them, but be on them. And I just talked about math. These are milestone courses. Every semester has at least one milestone course that you have to take that semester in sequence, or it throws off your whole schedule. In engineering, they call it the critical path. If you don't take this semester, it throws you off. It may be your first semester, but if you don't take that math your first semester, you may have already bought yourself an additional semester at the end because you threw your sequence off. Clearly, that's more important in some of the technical areas that have more prereqs, or some of the health areas, but it's clearly very important. This, I think, is one of the most exciting parts of this, intrusive advising. This really tries to flip the whole advising thing very differently, because the system has triggers. If you get a C or less, you have to see an advisor to sign up for the next semester, because they know half of the ones that are at 2.0 are eventually going to drop out. They also know if you get more than 2 courses behind, you have to see your counselor, because they're going to drop out. So this forces you to see your counselor, and of course you have to see your counselor if somehow you're trying to wiggle out of that milestone course and didn't sign up for it, because they make sure that you do that. But what this does, and I think that one of the speakers yesterday talked about the fact, actually it was Tim Rennick in a subsection that was talking about that, is that the data is overwhelming. The students that need to see counselors don't see counselors. The students that don't need to see counselors see counselors. And so this changes this. If you're on a pre-approved plan, you don't need to see your counselor. If, on the other hand, those triggers hit, you need to see your counselor. And so this allows the counseling to be focused on the students that need it the most, and the students that need it the least, they can go on their pathway. This is very important, and again, technology can support this by alerting counselors as to the course-taking patterns of their students. This is, again, challenging another notion. Hawaii started out with their four-year colleges on what they call 15 to finish. They had a lot of students taking 12 credit hours, not 15. I mentioned yesterday it's kind of de facto full-time student concept right now. In the course of 1 year, with a pretty effective campaign, both at the campus level and statewide, they went from 37% of their incoming freshmen taking 15 credit hours to 55% of their incoming freshmen taking 15 credit hours. They're dramatically changing the paradigm how students think about going full-time, and that will also dramatically change the numbers of students that graduate on time and the numbers of students that graduate at all, because the evidence is overwhelming. You need to get at least 24 credit hours your first semester, first year, if you're going to graduate at all, and 30 if you're going to get on time. Block schedules, I talked about this a little bit yesterday. This is probably more applicable to community colleges, but this really is another game changer. I think I mentioned the Tennessee Tech Centers have a 75% graduation rate as compared to maybe 25% graduation rates across the country and 15% graduation rates for the community colleges in Tennessee. The CUNY system in New York City, block schedules, you go in the morning, you go in the afternoon, 55% graduation rate compared to 25% citywide graduation rate. They take attendance, it's a whole program. In New York City, it's more academic. 75% of those students transfer. Highly effective strategies. And students, once they're in these programs, they love them, because if you're in your morning block, you're free all afternoon, you're free all evening. If you're in the afternoon block, you're free all morning, you're free all evening. It really makes it more possible for them to be with their families or work. This has to be connected to the workforce. A lot of discussion yesterday about that I can't really add to. Is very powerful. But these holistic programs really need to be designed. If you're going right into the workforce, to do that. If you're going to graduate school, they need to be designed to do that. And finally, is a way of best practices across the country. These colleges that I'm going to mention are getting, again, these are game changers. They're extraordinary returns. Florida State is getting high graduation rates. What's not on the slide is their African American students and their Latino students graduate at almost the same rate as their white students. Very impressive, one of the best in the country in terms of implementing this strategy. Arizona State, newer at this. They are really improving their retention rate. They've already seen about a 40% increase in their on-time graduation rate. And their students that are on track, they produce these really nice graphs every year, who's on track to graduate. And that's gone steadily up. You can see how high it's gone for students that are on track to graduate. Extremely impressive. Georgia State, I mentioned them yesterday, and I know that Tim Rennick is here from Georgia State. Again, one of the best, if not the best in the country in terms of graduation rates for low-income students, and especially for African-American students and Hispanics. And I mentioned just a second ago the CUNY system, community college, New York City, very different than the tech centers, but they are getting a 55% graduation rate, and 75% of those students go on to four-year colleges. And the tech centers, which I mentioned, which is really a great model, low-income students, adult students over the age of 25, high percentage of minority students, extremely impressive graduation rates and placement rates. And so in closing, as I said yesterday, that we could write the book, 101 things that you might do to increase college completion. And you probably have 25 things on your plan. And I used to believe that. I used to believe that if we did this incremental change and we did it consistently over time, that we would get the change we needed. And the truth is that hasn't happened. And the people in K-12 have been at this longer than we have. They've been at it 20, 30, 40 years. And yet, they can't get incremental change in a positive way. And so I'm saying to you, these are places that we're seeing remarkable change, game changers. And you need to do one of these key strategies, the block scheduling, the guided pathways, having students go full-time, having them go 15 credit hours, and effectively deal with remediation through co-rec strategies, and you can get dramatic results as they have. So I'd encourage you very strongly to do this, to work down this pathway. And you're also fortunate to have, right here in Georgia State, as one of the best models in the country. So thank you very much for having me.